And welcome back to the Keystone Kickoff Show. He's T. Frank, I'm Jim, and it's the fourth quarter. T. Frank, before we get to our topic, we need a winner from Ask T. Frank. Who is your winner?
Something that, again, we don't talk about a whole lot. I like the topic of people developing, people getting better. So Paul in Binghamton asking about James Franklin and where he can develop as a coach. You know, I think that's one of the reasons he's still here after 10 years is he's gotten better himself throughout his career in terms of game day development, outside best practice, all the things, you know, that we, even going down to what we talked about in quarter number one of being able to take good ideas from other places and adapt them to what Penn State is doing from like an open practice and how that works to having two different teams going at the same time if you can manage it through health, all those things. Like improving every day, getting 1% every better is the cliche he uses, but it seems like he's a guy that actually lives by it. But we don't ever talk about that. So I think that was a good topic to bring up of, you know, the James Franklin and his development as a coach.
I think you just picked Paul because he talked about eating his T. Franks at the ballpark. T. Frank, we've got a little bit of a different topic for quarter number 4, something that interests both you and me, and that is the dilemma, speaking of coaches and Coach Franklin, that decision of what to do on fourth down, either the choice of going for it or field goal, go for it, or punt. And I think, was this the one that you got from one of your listeners or contributors on Blue White Illustrated?
Yes. Yeah, that was one of the people at the Blue White Illustrated message board. They're watching the KSN show on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. And one of them said, I want to know a little bit more about going forward on fourth down, have a conversation about the T formation, Penn State's success, because you and I talked about this last week or the week before. Penn State's like 60% on fourth down. I have the number up in front of me here. They are 6th in the nation. They won fourth down on 70% of their attempts, 21 out of 30 attempts. So for people that think like it's a bad idea and like they're one of the best in the country in terms of going out forward on fourth down and picking their spots. You don't get to 70% conversion rate without knowing, you know, like the spots to take it.
And you're a little more successful when you have a Nick Singleton or a Katron Allen carrying the ball. And we saw the difference with this Penn State team just a few years ago. 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 was a nightmare. Now,
Yep.
T. Frank, if you talked about James Franklin being analytical, I think you and I are both analytical type thinkers. And I think if you follow football at all and you follow the analytics, teams should go for it on fourth down more often. It's my personal belief the reason why it doesn't happen is because if you punt the ball, no one criticizes you. If you go for it and miss, you get criticized for it.
Well, James Franklin's actually talked about that.
Biggest issue.
Yeah, James Franklin's actually talked about that, where it's like immediately afterwards, the color analyst says, I don't know if I would have gone for that. And his point was maybe you should say that before it happens so that you don't get to the benefit of hindsight, because that happens a lot. And that is the perception that is then generated to the audience.
Well, I'm going to give you my example, and I believe this was Penn State Purdue a few years back. I think during the Joe Moorhead era, going towards the end of the half, Purdue has the ball like on their own 29-yard line, 4th and 1, and the color analyst does ahead of time, warns them, do not go for it. You have to punt it here. You have to. Meanwhile, Penn State was getting hot. As a Penn State fan, I'm thinking, please punt it so my team could get the ball back. And, of course, they got it back, went down the field and scored. But I'll tell you what didn't happen. That announcer did not come back on and say, well, gee, maybe I was wrong. Maybe they should have gone for it. However, if the reverse had happened, he would have said, I told you so, correct?
Well, I mean, I assume. Yeah, every human loves to say, I told you so. Every human loves to be right. So I would assume that human would very much love to tell somebody, I told you so, because it feels good and because you feel validated in your position, which a lot of times we're out here blown in the wind, Jim. Like all of us, we have our thoughts and opinions. And sometimes if you're self-aware, you're like, well, maybe I'm not right. And, you know, a curse of people who have self-awareness. All
right, well, let's talk about this, T. Frank, with the fourth down situation. I think you and I agree. Teams should go for it more often than they do. What are the parameters, though, that fans are missing, coaches are missing, that need to be taken into consideration a little more often when it's time to make that decision to go for it or not?
Well, I want to be clear that I don't have all the answers here. I have my set of understandings and what I've learned from, studying football and listening to smart people. So I can't say that I have hard data for you. I do think that I've come off my position a little bit of like, always go for it. Always, you've got to have something unique that makes it a higher percentage chance to convert on fourth down. So a couple things that are important to know, and let's start with the negative. What is the result of you not getting it on fourth down? And that's an area where I think if you look at a chart of what is the percentage chance that your opponent then scores afterwards. So if you give the ball up at the 50-yard line, this is according to some of the research I've done, the other team has a 40% chance of scoring. It's not 90. Like when you give the ball to the 50-yard line, I think a lot of fans think automatic points for the other team it's 40%. And then when you back from there, obviously it goes higher. But if you make a team, so this is the other thing I think where we talk about James Franklin learning. If you've got a great defense and you've got a good punter, the chances of the opponent scoring, once you get outside the 20, get above 40%. But below that, like it's in the 30% chance that you score if you start within your own 20. So the balance of what you do versus what your opponent can do, like field position is a thing. But scoring points, if you want to, then we zoom out even further to like converting a fourth down and getting points out of that, and the percentage chance of winning in real time, it goes up astronomically. So even if it is better to trust your defense, if you've got a very strong defense, going for it on fourth down is not the nightmare that you think it is. Like the conversion rate for some of these top teams is 60 and 70%, like we talked about. So I do think there are some nuances to it that are not purely analytical, because the data is looking at every single football team, right? It's all the fourth downs that have ever happened. But not every fourth down and not every team is created equally. So you do have to understand situation, talent, strength, advantages, matchup, etc., and then make your best decision based off the math in kind of thread that needle. I do think that is a part of what a good coach does in these situations.
And T. Frank, there's some subtle things, even part of the analytical, like if you're at 4th and 1, what is the percentage of making it? And I know a lot of people think if I'm in my own territory, especially buried deep, I'm on my own 10-yard line, I definitely should not go for it because I'm giving up possession on my own 10. But the fact is, if I punt the ball, where I'm still giving the opponent, the ball on my side of the field. So there's more going on here than just the pure statistics. Do I make it on fourth down or not? There's where are you giving your opponent the ball, and how highly do you value possession? Just by turning the ball over, you are changing the game if you're not keeping possession.
Yeah. And I was just trying to look up some more hard data instead of talking around it. So this is according to NFL.com. This is the next gen stats. 4th and inches, conversion probability is 77%. 4th and 2 is 59%. So you have a better than half chance, almost 60% chance at 4th and 2 of making it. 4th and 1, 72%. And this is, again, going back into, if you want to extend that out into college, I think that the margins are a little bit wider. But at the same time, if you have a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson or a Nick Singleton, somebody who changes the dynamics of that in that situation, or you've got a great offensive line, those probabilities are higher for you. So going back to James Franklin and where they ranked last year in terms of fourth down conversion percentage, the only team that had more raw fourth down conversion percentages in the top 10 was West Virginia. And they had 22. Penn State had 21. Penn State had the highest number of fourth down conversions and the highest percentage. So they went for it a lot. They had a lot of opportunities, and they got it. So those are, I think, when you have a balanced attack, you have the ability to put the defense in a no-win situation, and you truly have like these weapons. It is actually a bad idea not to use them. Going back to the, like whether you should punt and trust your defense, score points. Put your skill positions in places to score points.
Well, your message board person who brought this up also, you said, brought up the idea of this T formation, which is part of Penn State's success on these fourth downs when it's 4th and 1, 4th and 2. They're just playing good at it with the talent they have, and with Mike Yurcich, putting together this T formation scheme. It seems like they're successful almost every time.
Close. They had like I said, 21 of 30, but I was looking at some of the data from the T formation, and it's pretty astronomical. And just to go into that formation, a little bit of the X's and O's, there's a lot of different varieties, and they evolved it over the year. If you remember, it started out as a quarterback sneak, and then they were able to run right or left based on, the defensive formation, and then they exploded out of that into a 4-receiver set or a receiver screen. So they're able to do things with personnel that fit within their offense. And this is the other thing, is like they'll run a screen with 2 tight ends out into the boundary anyway. And, the only difference is now they're throwing out a running back along with the guy who's going to catch the football. So it all fits within the offense, and it's all based on matchups and what you want to do. And you have to keep evolving these things. So if Penn State comes into this next year with the same game plan, and they don't add a new wrinkle, add a new subtext of here's another thing we could do out of this, defenses will adapt and shut it down. And going back to some of the stuff in the NFL, like, you have to have a plan, and a good plan on 4th down. You can't just run anything and the numbers will work for you. You have to have certain advantages, certain things you can do in order to convert it. So it still takes good coaching to be so good on 4th down. It's not just the numbers give it to you. You've got to have both sides of that.
And let's add this factor in too with T. Frank, with what Penn State did last year, specifically out of the T formation. It wasn't always just that they made the first down. They had big plays out of that and touchdowns out of that formation. So it wasn't just, 4th and 1, we picked up 2 yards, we moved the sticks. No, how often did we see Singleton break out? Or as you said, by the end of the season, they were sometimes throwing the ball out of it. All right, T. Frank, that's it for quarter number 4. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you join us next time on the Keystone Kickoff Show.